Hey, welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma. Welcome back.
Here we are.
Yes, we are.
In the flesh.
We are here.
Hey, you doing all right?
I am.
Excellent, excellent. So today we're going to be talking about identity.
Yes.
There's obviously, right, black people in the United States have had many different names.
Yes.
Negro,
Yes.
Afro-American, Black,
Yeah.
African-American, so on and so forth. Right? How do you identify?
Charisma.
Oh, okay. You're an individual.
Yes.
Do you supersede race? Is that what you're telling me?
No,
Oh,
no,
all right.
no.
I'm about to say.
I mean, African American. I don't have an issue with that.
Got you.
I don't have an issue with being black. I don't have to me, as long as those names or identities aren't attached to something negative, I feel okay.
So as long as they put some respect on your name,
yeah, just put some respect on it.
Put some respect on it.
Yeah.
It's all good. Yeah. So I asked this because there is, on the one hand, right, one of the things we've been talking about in a few of the episodes is we see this renewed Black pride.
Yeah.
And that kind of points us in the direction of Africa.
Yeah.
Right now, when we were growing up, some of the things that was one of the worst things that you could be called was African or any.
Yeah, and I always wondered why that was.
Right.
And even now, it's amazing to me how many people are just completely ignorant of the rich history of Africa, of the resources, of, the richness of the continent.
Right.
A lot of people just, it's kind of sad, but I've actually heard people refer to Africa as a country and not a continent. And it's just almost like this, I don't even know how to put it, this place that's so far away from people's concept
Exactly.
of, I don't even know.
Right. Part of that obviously has to do with I will say, an intentional propaganda, mechanism that was designed to separate us from our identity. But it's also we have been taught from the time that we were small, right? And our parents were taught and their parents were taught that Africa was, backwards, lacked civilization, so on and so forth. So it will make sense that if you want to, aspire to the heights of civilization, you would want to distance yourself from that. But, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Marcus Garvey, and all of them told us that you can't, hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree itself. You know what I mean? So we can't really love ourselves if we hate our very roots.
And I think a lot of that also comes back to us learning about who we are.
Right.
I'm not 100% on board with these ancestry.coms and all of those because of other reasons and, my theories.
What are your reasons and theories? Go ahead, break it down.
Well, there's been a history of black and brown folks getting experimented on and their DNA being used for things other than what it should be used for. So I'm leery of those things, but I do appreciate for people that are brave enough to do it, that there is that option to try to tie you back to your roots, because so many of us have lost that unless you have a parent that, came directly from Africa here a generation or two ago. Most people don't have a tie to their country from Africa, where they're from, their village or their native tongue. So those are some of the things that I think are good to be able to reconnect to. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about identity, but we have to take a little bit of a break right here on 28 Days and Beyond, but we'll be back right after this.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond, and right now we're joined by Sarah Harris, who is a student and filmmaker at Villanova University.
Yes. Why are you laughing?
Filmmaker. I'm a beginning filmmaker.
Come on now.
But you were a filmmaker nonetheless.
Exactly.
Yes.
So let's begin with that. Tell us a little about what you've been up to.
I went to Ghana for 2 weeks in October, filming a documentary basically about the sort of loss and break of identity through modes of colonialism and slavery, both in Ghana with a parallel in Philadelphia.
Wow. Was it your first trip to Africa?
It was. It was definitely life-changing, and learned more about more than just filmmaking, but also about yourself, especially as an African-American woman going on the trip.
So what kind of things did you find?
Yeah.
So throughout filming, talking to and working with the locals that were there and sort of dispelling those stereotypes and rumors that you don't really think that you have at this point in your life. And then
can you be more specific? What types of stereotypes?
Yeah, so I didn't really know anything about Africa. I'm ashamed to say, as a continent. Ghana as a country was even further down the list of things that I knew. And I didn't really know what to expect and what we were going to see. And walking through the slave castles at Cape Coast and Elmina Beach, and seeing the history that's there and feeling that connection that you maybe wouldn't feel on U.S. soil was really life-changing.
Was it? I mean, so you definitely felt something in those places.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Walking in, I felt a sense of pain and hurt and heartbreak that can only be a small sliver of what actually went down there.
Mm-hmm.
I felt and saw things that were representative of the death and the horrors that went through there, and you walk through there and know that the reason that when we got there I paid a foreigner price was because of those walls, was because of what happened there, those cells, things like that.
That's very interesting because when I went to Ghana and went into the castle, because they have 3 different prices. They have a price for foreigners, a price for students, and a price for nationals. Mm-hmm. And I made an argument, an impassioned plea, that in fact I shouldn't have to pay a foreigner price because I was a result of what went down at that very place. And the person probably just more annoyed with me than anything else let me pay the student fee. But I think that's really.
I was gonna ask you, did it work?
I mean, I ain't paid a farm. I ain't, you know what I'm saying? I ain't no Bruni, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But you know, I mean, that's a really fascinating concept. Because when we talk about not only how we see ourselves in relation to them, or we see them in relation to us, it's also about how they see us in relation to them. So how did that play itself out, your relationship with the Ghanaians with whom you were interacting?
Yeah, so before we had gone, I was sort of warned that sometimes in Ghana they have seen this sort of same poor media portrayal of African Americans that sort of circulates here. So there was a warning of just be wary, because sometimes they are also weary of African Americans because of the media portrayals and things. And that made me really nervous, because if I wasn't going to be accepted in the United States with the racial tensions and the things that are going on here, if I wasn't accepted into Africa, or in Ghana specifically, on the continent, what would that really mean for my identity? So that was something deep. Going into. Very deep. Yeah. I didn't really know how I was going to feel. I was well received. People were saying welcome home, and there was a sense of community that I had really never experienced. And so I had a really great experience with that. But I know that there have been accounts of people sort of not having the same welcoming.
And that's really interesting because, like you said, we've been portrayed a certain way over there in terms of African Americans here in Africa, but also there's been this kind of back and forth, and a lot of times we have conversations about this tension that happens even when some of our brothers and sisters from Africa come to America and not really knowing how we're supposed to interact, and kind of this wall that's up on both sides. So it's interesting that you were able to break through that in a certain respect and find a sense of identity. And we definitely want to talk a little bit more about that. But we have to take a break here at 28 Days and Beyond, but we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We are still here with Sarah Harris. So let's get into the film a little bit more. The title, Sankofa, what does that mean?
So Sankofa is a Ghanaian word and one of the 46 dialects that they have. And what it means is that you have to go back to move forward. And that's exactly what we did with our film. A lot of, when we first got there, we were working with the idea of identity, and quickly found out that identity is a huge topic. And so we went back and sort of are working with portraying pre-colonialism Ghana, and the fact that when they came in and brought religion and education, I put that in quotes, because they had religion and they had education and they had those things that were maybe not westernized, but they were there and they were important and they were valid. And then showing how when the transatlantic slave trade started, there is that break of identity. When they go through what is literally the door of no return, that's where they don't see their home continent anymore, their home country. They don't see anyone that they know anymore, and they're sort of in this limbo state of, we're in America and we're now considered subhumans, and moving through that, and how today African Americans, particularly in the US and also Ghanaians, have to restructure and construct what their identity really is with these, transgenerational traumas, and sort of moving through the idea of the mental slavery that encapsulates a lot of minds today.
Well, that was a great answer.
Yeah, that was a mouthful.
So, but how has this trip, the experience, but also, sort of wading through this filmmaking process, how has that shaped your identity?
It's done a lot for my identity. Prior to going on the trip, I would always identify myself as African American or Black, and sort of didn't really even see, is there a difference? Or, I would never identify myself as African because I've never been to Africa, and I'm not really like African. It's sort of the mentality that I had. And then you go to Ghana, and it really caused me to look at myself and think, why can other people be like, I'm British or Swedish or something like that, and they've never been to Sweden or the UK or anything like that, and I don't even feel comfortable enough to really identify myself as African. And that, I think, is a direct correlation from what our movie is really talking about, is that because we didn't grow up there and we sort of segregate ourselves from Africans or people who are not a direct result of the diaspora, and then we feel separate and not united in being one as a people and things like that. So I think that I'm much more comfortable identifying myself as African and really taking hold of my identity and the identity that I've had to reconstruct since
amazing.
Slavery or colonialism.
Something that you said earlier, you said that, prior to you going over there, you really didn't know a lot about Africa, and you really didn't know a lot about Ghana specifically. I can only assume that a lot of your peers also kind of fit in that bag. So what's some of the information you've been able to bring back to share with them to kind of enlighten them on some of what you learned?
Yeah, definitely. So when I got back, everyone was like, well, how is Africa? And I thought, well, Africa is a continent of over 50 countries.
Yeah.
And I went to Ghana for 2 weeks in like 3 cities. So I can't even really tell you how all of Ghana was. But like Accra and Cape Coast were cool for like a week. And that was like something that was really telling to me, because I thought, wow, really people will just put Africa in this bubble. And even one of our main characters sort of talks about in one of his interviews, we're like, well, what do you think like Africa is like? And he was like, well, they all have community and nobody wears shoes and things like that. And he's from North Philly. And so why doesn't he know anything about Africa? I think that those were the types of conversations that the people who went on the trip with me had to have in our communities, of saying that we can't group Africa as one country, which was a problem in itself. And even if we do acknowledge it as the continent that it is, every place in Africa, every country in Africa is not the same. And we are sorely miseducated on that.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah Harris, we really thank you for joining us today on 28 Days and Beyond. So the film will be out later in the spring, correct?
Yes, we'll be premiering in May.
Yes,
Nice.
and we cannot wait to see it.
We'll definitely be there. Well, thank you once again, and we'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. That was quite the riveting discussion.
Certainly was. Certainly was. What are some things that you take away from it?
Just the hugeness that is Africa, the continent. And one of the things that I think Sarah said that really resonated with me is Ghana in itself. There are 40, what did she say, 46 languages spoken there?
Certainly,
Like that just, that really put things into perspective for me. And just kind of doing the work to learn about the things that you don't know, and not living with the assumptions that you might have that are completely just false.
So in the introduction, you had made reference to, the DNA test, but more so than that, the impetus of amongst people to really try and seek out where they're from. Right? What do you think the importance of that is?
I think it really comes back to identity. You know, if you don't know who you are, you don't know who you are.
Right, exactly. As simple as that.
When our ancestors were brought here, one of the things,
kidnapped, taken, stolen.
All of
right,
those
let's
things.
just, it wasn't like they said, hey, you gotta.
No, just come on over.
Gotta cruise to the Caribbean, folks. All expenses paid. Go ahead.
But when all that happened, you know, we lost our families,
Right.
we lost our land, we lost our languages, and those things were actually beaten out of us, you know, on purpose so that we wouldn't have a sense of identity. If you don't know who you are, people can shape you to become anything they want you to be.
Exactly.
If you have no roots,
right.
it's like a tree with no roots.
Yeah, exactly. It's just gonna fall. Exactly.
Exactly.
I mean,
so,
and that to me again is, you know, there have always been attempts made by, you know, African people of the diaspora to reconnect with, you know, Africa in some way or another. And it kind of comes in waves. But right now, I think we're really experiencing something that some may say is actually just on a superficial level. They want to wear the clothes or they want to, right, so on and so forth. But I do think that, if nothing else, it's evidence of Black people's yearning to connect with something larger.
Yeah, exactly.
And that to me, I think, is really important. So to see that, you know, the students at Villanova are taking a trip to, you know, to build this documentary, that's important.
Yeah.
It's timely, and it's something that we all need.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And I've been to Africa once.
All right.
I went to Morocco, spent some time in Casablanca and
Excuse me,
Marrakesh and Rabat. And, you know, even there, one of the things that I saw almost immediately is that the culture changes based on where you are in Africa. So the culture of Morocco or Casablanca or Marrakesh specifically are specific to those areas.
Right.
So in order for you to really learn about the different cultures and areas, you have to travel. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully one day, you know, going back and kind of spreading my wings. And
yeah, but I think there's a plot. You know me and my conspiracy theories. Yo, you know how expensive it is to go to Africa?
Oh,
it's
I
mad
know.
cheap to go to Europe. Now, obviously, right? They may say, you know, but
that's true.
That's always a.
I'm saving.
There you go.
I'm saving.
There you go.
So that I can do it.
I think that's an important point. I mean, one of our guests on the show was talking about study abroad programs, for instance, and I took the opportunity to study abroad in Ghana, where I was there for 3.5 months, and we went to Benin and Togo. And one of the really powerful things about it was an opportunity for me to take time, you know, during my college experience to really get to know a place for more than just, you know, a quick visit or so.
Yeah.
And it was really just the beginning. Like you said, there are so many places to go. There are so many things to learn about each place. Obviously, it's something that would require a lot more time and energy. But speaking of time, unfortunately, right, we've come to the end of this show.
It's about that time.
It's as it always is, right? But thank you for joining us for another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you soon.